one, we're going to continue with the nervous system. So as a little recap, the nervous system is split into two divisions, your central nervous system and your peripheral nervous system. We've been focusing on your central nervous system, which is comprised of your brain and your spinal cord. The last two lessons focused solely on the brain, so today we're going to focus solely on the spinal cord. Now, what is it? Where is it located? And what does it do? Well, your spinal cord extends from your foramen magnum, and this is the opening in the base or the bottom of your skull. And it goes from that opening all the way down to your first or second lumbar vertebrae. Now, remember, lumbar vertebrae is your lower back. The function of the spinal cord is to provide a two-way conduction pathway both to the brain and from the brain, which means signals from your body are able to travel up and your brain is able to process it once it goes to the spinal cord and then send a signal back down. Now, the spinal cord is cushioned and protected by something called meninges, and we're going to go into a little bit more detail about meninges when we talk about what protects the central nervous system. Now, from the spinal cord, there are actually 31 pairs of spinal nerves that come from it. Now, remember, spinal nerves are actually part of your PNS system, your peripheral nervous system. And then at the very bottom of your spinal cord, there are a collection of spinal nerves at the very bottom, and this collection is called cauda equina. And it's usually called this because equestrian is like horse riding, and so they've always said it looks like the tail of a horse. So here is going to be your spinal cord. Notice it goes from the base of your skull, because it connects with your brain, all the way down into your first or second lumbar vertebrae. So here's where it ends, and then at the bottom, these are a collection of spinal nerves, which are part of your PNS. Again, that collection is called cauda equina. Here is another picture of a close-up of your spinal cord that we're going to focus on, and I'm going to be referring back and forth to these pictures over time. Basically, the center is going to be your spinal cord, and then over here, these are your spinal nerves that branch off of it. Remember, you have 31 pairs. So first, we're going to focus on the gray matter of the spinal cord. So the gray matter of your spinal cord is mostly internal. It's composed of cell bodies, which means they're going to be the nuclei of the different cell nerves that are part of your spinal cord. And they tend to, in a picture, look like a butterfly or the letter H. This gray matter actually surrounds a central canal, which is full of cerebral spinal fluid, which helps keep equal pressure in your brain and spinal cord. So again, if we're going to look at the picture here, our gray matter is a little bit darker. Notice it does form more of wings or that H shape. Also note that it's around this central canal, again, that is filled with cerebral spinal fluid. This picture does show, and we're going to talk about two areas of this gray matter. We have the dorsal horn, dorsal meaning posterior, so that's towards the back. And then we also have a ventral gray matter. So ventral means anterior or towards the front. And then we're also going to talk a little bit more about this lateral horn of the gray matter. So gray matter of the spinal cord and spinal roots. First, let's focus on this dorsal or posterior horns. This houses something known as interneurons. We've learned about interneurons on our last test. These are the neurons that are between sensory and motor neurons. They helped connect those two. So this receives information from the sensory neurons, whose fibers enter the spinal cord through something called the dorsal root or ganglion. So basically, here is our dorsal root and ganglion. Things come in, signals come in, and they come in over here to our dorsal horn. Then an interneuron processes that and will send that signal out. The ventral or anterior horns houses motor neurons, which once it goes through that interneuron, it has to go through the motor neuron to the rest of the body. This is going to send information out of the ventral root. So if we look at it, that picture we were drawing on, the interneuron is going to process it. We're going to send that signal out here. And notice that this part is known as our ventral horn. And then it's going to go out through the ventral root right here to be sent out to the rest of your body. Note that the dorsal root and the ventral root both combine right out here to create your spinal nerve. And that's just what's listed on that last slide. Dorsal and ventral root fuse to form the spinal nerve. The second part of the spinal cord that we most focus on is white matter. It's white because it is composed of myelinated fiber tracts. Remember, when things are myelinated, it helps speed up the transmission of a nerve impulse throughout our body. There are 3 regions: dorsal, lateral, and ventral, similar like you see with the gray matter. So, sensory or afferent tracts, these conduct impulses towards the brain. Motor, or also known as efferent tracts, this carries impulses from the brain down to our skeletal muscles through our spinal cord. So the whole point of white matter is to send things up to your brain and then down from your brain. So they're ascending and descending tracts. So where do these ascending and descending tracts occur in terms of our 3 regions? All of our dorsal regions of our white matter are ascending tracts, or sending things to our brain. If we were to look at a picture, here is our white matter that surrounds our gray. If we look at our dorsal white matter, which is up here, everything up here is sending signals up to your brain. Lateral and ventral regions can be both ascending and descending. So when I say lateral and ventral, here is our lateral of our white matter, and our ventral can be both ascending and descending. So right here, this is a good picture that kind of shows the white matter. Here we have our lateral. Here we have our ventral white matter. Remember, these are both ascending and descending. And then dorsal over here is just ascending. Here is a picture to kind of show how things flow through our spinal cord if we were to get stuck by a tack. So here is our tack. This is going to be our stimulus. We feel pain. Our sensory receptors are going to pick that up. Here, our sensory receptors are going to send it through our dorsal root into our spinal cord. And it's going to come in here where we see a little interneuron. Now, it can do one of 2 things. It can be a reflex, and that interneuron can actually send a signal out the motor neuron and tell our muscle to pull back our arm so we're no longer being stabbed. Or the signal can also be sent through up to our brain. And notice here we have an ascending track that's happening up to our brain, where we're going to integrate that information, that sensory information, in our somatic sensory area of our cortex. It's going to make a decision, and it's going to send that signal back down our spinal cord. And it's going to come in here and then decide, let's pull my arm away, which goes out of the ventral horn and the ventral root to tell our muscle to pull away. So it's very complex. Our brain and nervous system and our spinal cord all work together. And that's the end of today's lesson. If you have any questions, please make sure you ask. Otherwise, I hope you guys have a great day.